Oh, looky who we have here. It's Jonathan Toews. What's up, my man?
What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Thankful for the opportunity to come on the podcast. It's a first for me, so that's a big one.
Podcast virgin.
Yeah, here it is.
I like it. So we've had a bunch of conversations that people would probably be surprised about, because one of the things that when we first met, one of the interests that you already had before even discussing me was the path of consciousness and trying to tackle these larger philosophical questions that you don't typically see from, an all-star athlete like yourself. Like, when did that awareness start to come into your life? Is that something that's always been there, or is that something that happened kind of recently?
Well, we're getting right into it. I like that. First question.
I don't fuck
We're
around
not
with the fucking
any
around.
Time. I guess I don't know. I'd like to think that there's a lot of guys out there that maybe do think and maybe do ask themselves those questions and aren't afraid to get into the deeper stuff. And it's just not necessarily a conversation I think is really being had in a whole lot of locker rooms, especially not ours. But doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some great athletes out there that are constantly digging in or looking around and drawing parallels from different aspects of competition, whether it's sports or business or anything that you can apply philosophy to and kind of like I said, draw parallels to what they do and understand more about what makes them successful and what they need to change about themselves.
I think that's level one that you're discussing. Level one is people using philosophy to learn an advantage, to find some way that they can improve performance. And that's a characteristic that I see kind of across the board with athletes on a variety of genres. But there's only one other athlete that I've met other than you that really concerns himself with the deepest philosophical issues, like spiritual issues that really don't have a direct bearing on performance on the field. And that's, Bodie Miller, who's one of my best friends who helped start on it together, because we had some of those similar ideas about both improving performance, but also just testing the depths of our own consciousness. And I think you take it a step beyond just let me learn about philosophy so that it can apply to my life. Like, a good example of that is the book Obstacle is the Way from Ryan Holiday.
Right.
That is really popular amongst athletes because it's very applicable. It is Stoic philosophy, but it's very applicable to the ice. But you've taken that a step further when wanting to, expand your understanding of spirituality and other areas that don't have a direct correlation. So, but where did that come from? Like, where did that extra layer beyond just what could help you on the ice come from?
Well, it's tough to tell. And I think if I can tell a little bit of my story, things kind of come full circle a little bit. I think, like you said, the first, foot in the door or whatever it is that people like myself kind of get into this stuff is just by learning how those principles can apply to their career and their craft and their sport or whatever they're doing, and learn how it makes them better. And I think for myself, I started to get into a lot of different stuff that you and I always discuss, and just trying to, like I said, draw those parallels between one thing and another and understand the principles that are similar in different things. So then you start getting into Stoicism, such as the book The Obstacle is the Way. You can talk about Buddhist thought and Taoism, all those different things that talk about just building that foundation, really understanding the natural flow of things and the incremental growth of not skipping any steps, and really just going through and learning how your own body moves and what makes you the best athlete or the best whatever, understanding more about your personality. And you can go on and on and on. But for me, it was, and I think we touched on this a little bit yesterday in the interview that we did too. Early on in my life, I love the sport of hockey, but there was some of the things that drove me to be the best weren't always maybe the best motivating factors. Some of the things that I think in all of our lives we have some emptiness that we're trying to fill, and that's what makes us establish ourselves as someone who's really successful at this one thing. And sometimes that creates an imbalance. And for me, the last little while is really understanding what those imbalances are in my life and trying to balance them out. And I think the more perspective you have, it not only improves your performance as an athlete, but it improves your personal life. So I think, again, getting back into the Buddhist train of thought and just that releasing of your suffering and getting rid of the attachments and the things that you know are on a certain level impermanent. And at some point, someday my hockey career is going to come to an end. Mm-hmm. And the better I can understand that, not only am I going to perform better and appreciate every time I get to step out on the ice at the United Center, am I going to motivate myself to play better then? Absolutely. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's kind of a swing there where I was almost okay with my poor performances, where I was able to be less miserable by those nights that didn't go my way. And I kind of ended up catching myself being like, well, that's not okay either. Sometimes that misery is what pushes us forward, is what, kind of instills us to keep pushing ourselves to be the best we can be. But then again, on the other side, I think it was just the balance between releasing that miserable feeling when you fail and when things don't go your way, and moving past that and being able to sit there and observe that failure and learn from it, and find a way to continually motivate yourself to go forward and be better, while not carrying that negativity into your personal life. So it's kind of a balance between the two, where it's come full circle in a way, where a lot of that philosophy is kind of applying. And again, it's a never-ending progression, I guess, where I'm learning more and more every day. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I set up a little bit of a false dichotomy in saying that there were things that didn't apply to performance, but you correctly, describe the fact that really everything you do will affect your performance, mm-hmm. And people create these kind of silos where they say, oh, this is just spirituality, has nothing to do with my career, has nothing to do with, this is just my philosophy on happiness, doesn't have to do with what I have to do on the ice. But really, the idea of total human optimization, the idea of expansion of consciousness involves everything, because everything is interlinked. And I think we all too often create separation that really isn't there. And I think I like how your story went from, the first impulse is, all right, how can I get ahead? How can I improve myself? How can I get where I want to be? And I think that's where a lot of people, even people listening here, are starting. They're just focused on that initial step, which is, all right, how can I get to where I want? And both you and I are in a fortunate position where we've gotten to that level of success, where I'm head of the company that I've always dreamed of creating, and you're playing hockey at the level you've always dreamed that you could play it. But it doesn't stop there. That's just one train stop in a long, never-ending cyclical destination that we're on, with actually no destination. It's just one stop. And for us, the expansion of further is, how do we be more happy? How do we make the lows less miserable? And how do we make the highs more enjoyable? That's and that's really the most genuine pursuit of everything else. I think we have a lot of these other intermediary goals, like, oh, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want to be all these things. But really, what else is there but true satisfaction with your life? Because I think both of us probably know a lot of people who are both rich and famous,
so I think
and
that's
happy
kind
and
of
unhappy.
Where the problem lies a bit, and it's kind of what I'm saying, that if you're able to find that contentment and that release of the desire to continue to strive because that's what's going to fulfill you, is one thing, but then you do lose that drive to a certain degree. So it's kind of a balance of both. Like, I really think that it's kind of a mind game you got to play with yourself, where you want to be the best you can be, and you're okay with pushing yourself to that limit, but also when it's time to withdraw, you're okay with those failures, that it's not going to carry into your personal life and into your relationships, and then where you're able to kind of differentiate between the two a little bit. So I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think what you're talking about is there's some ego motivation that generally propels us to a certain degree. This person said I'd never make it. This coach said I sucked. This person doubted me. I'll prove the haters wrong. This kind of attitude, and that's fine. And I think all of us can use that fuel, but it's like a dirty fuel. It's like burning coal, because laced with it is going to be a lot of suffering, because you're using the ego, which is ultimately an incredibly vulnerable beast. It's extremely sensitive. It's always taking offense. It's always, you're subject to that, and you're using that as a fuel source to propel you. And then when you are kind of working on that, and because you're trying to diminish the negative aspects of ego, you need to replace that fuel source. And I think the only way to replace that fuel source which is the ego is focused on myself. How can I get better? How can I dominate?
Yeah.
How can I this? You have to replace that with a mission. And that, for me, was really came to like a poignant place when I went to the jungle and I did the Wachuma for the first time. And my mission was very clearly stated as para el bien de todos, like for the good of all. And that's been that thing. That's because I had, healthy, strong, sensitive, normal ego that was a huge motivating factor. And it's still there. I don't think you ever get rid of it. You work with it and play with it. But what's allowed me to fill that gap in motivation is true dedication to mission of what my purpose here is for the greatest good. Para el bien de todos means for the good of all. Like, how can I apply myself for the good of all? And I think as I've seen you've been on that similar trajectory of first step is how can I be the most dominant hockey player ever? So I have the money and the recognition and the success that I've always dreamed of having. And now that you're achieving that, you're transitioning to how can I use everything that I have to be the greatest, to make the greatest possible impact on the world. And I think that's one of the things that we've found a close affinity for is we're both in that transitional stage of let's bring everybody together. Let's that old, I think it's a Snoop Dogg line, like it ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. Like what's the fun of us having all the glory and accolades and happiness? Really, it's all about the happiness. What's up with us having all the happiness if the rest of the world isn't as well? So dedicating those efforts into the happiness of others, I think, is how you replace that initial ego fuel.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of brings into my mind an issue too that in some ways is I guess not hypocritical. I mean, I try not to preach anything or act as this person who's got it all figured out and is trying to tell everyone else how to do things. I think for myself, it's just trying to share the opportunities that have kind of been presented to me, that I've been able to make the right choices and to follow those right leads and obviously meet and hang out with some people who are not only inspirational but influential in all the right ways. But the sad thing is sometimes it honestly takes someone to realize their dreams, to get all that way, to put in their, lifetime of work to achieving whatever the heck they wanted to achieve, to look back and say, okay, well, wait a second, this isn't everything. There's still some things within that I was not too worried about the whole time. And it kind of goes back to the imbalances that I'm talking about in everyone's life. But as you said, if you can get to that point, or at least you can start to invest in bettering yourself as a person, not only what you do, but just how you perform daily tasks and how you just kind of take in the whole experience every single day, I think you'll get that better bearing, that better awareness, and that consciousness that you're talking about. And that's when people can really start to have the proper impact on the people around them. Para el bien de todos, as you say. But sometimes it takes a long time for some people to come to that realization.
Sure.
That's where it should all start to begin with, and that's where happiness really resides, is in figuring some of those things out. So, I guess that's kind of what it comes down to.
No, it makes sense. And I think one of the things that also people fail to recognize is I've really found that the more I work on myself and the clearer I get internally, the easier things get externally. Like the more success becomes easy, as within, so without, as above, so below. That was one of the oldest, truest statements ever made. And the more you focus on being clear inwardly, the more you'll attract other people to the cause. You'll make connections that are real, because you won't be desperate, you won't be needy, you won't be forceful. You'll be clear and content in yourself, and that's the magnet that draws both wealth and people and allies to the cause around you. Whereas any kind of negativity or ego that's out of control, or greed or fear, all of these things are natural repellents. Those are like the human repellents. You spray that on yourself and humans are going to scatter.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true. If you get clear and conscious and you're just putting out love, you might attract some parasites as well who are going to try and feed off you that way, but you're also going to attract some other amazing allies. And it's like those video games where you start off as a single character, and then you go to some town and you meet this other character who's a good archer, then you meet the wizard, and then you meet these people, and then all of a sudden you got your squad.
Yeah.
And then with your squad, then you can accomplish so much more. And that's exactly how my success went. It was me following this path, working on myself, doing from psychedelics to meditation to floating to whatever I could to enhance my own clarity and my own consciousness. And then all of a sudden I started attracting allies. Bodie Miller, Joe Rogan, these different people who were instrumental in the start of On It. And then with my squad, I was able to create this thing that I couldn't have never created on my own. It would have been a long, arduous journey to do this by myself. But because I was able to gather allies and gather forces, then everything was much easier. But that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't done the internal work first.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right, and it kind of makes me think too. Obviously, I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of recognition. We look at our team success in Chicago. People always look to the guy with the C, the guy who's kind of in the middle of it all. And I absorb a lot of that positive attention for my leadership skills. But at the end of the day, it's the exact same thing. You take a little bit of everything that from the guys that are around you, the people that are around you that have different qualities that bring something different than you do. And although I think you can constantly consistently build and learn from those people, but I think it's just been a lot of fun to be in that room over a number of years with the same core group of guys that bring their own form of leadership in some ways. And some guys get more recognition. At the end of the day, in professional sports, they're always looking for a storyline. They're always looking for, a way they can write the story. So it's more fun from a fan's perspective to kind of watch this whole thing, a championship season, play out. There's always got to be a hero. There's always got to be, a couple guys that kind of take that. So I've always tried to, not get carried away with the compliments and the positivity that surrounds it, the good things I do, but also to remind myself of the as you're saying, you're talking about that awareness that you need to have to see like the different strengths that different people in your tribe or your team bring, not only to feed off that, but to realize how important that is for a solid structure, a solid team to operate. So we've been lucky to have that. We have a good group of guys and guys that know that as well, and that's why it's been so much fun too to be a part of that. So yeah, it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about often enough.
Yeah. I think all of these relationships that you talk about, as a leader, it's key to be humble enough to learn from everybody around you.
Right.
And that's something that, every new employee that comes in and on it, I can learn from. Every friend that I've had, I learn from. And I will get a disproportionate share of credit for On It successes. We come out with a new product. We come out with this Marvel barbell plate that we're coming out with, right? And I'm getting showered with compliments like, man, amazing work, blah, blah, blah. I basically just said yes. And I had a few suggestions of like, all right, let's make them bumper plates. And I had like very little to do with it, but that was, Mike, our CMO, who was the brainchild of this idea.
Yeah.
And I think, when I can, I always share those elements, but it's just going to be natural that the simple story of, oh, CEO, he's responsible for all the good things that happen on it. Oh, captain of the team, he's responsible for the good things that happen in the team atmosphere. It's really not true. It's this mountain that we're fortunate enough to be of service to the rest of the people, and I think that's really a distinction that some people lose as well. Like the CEO or the captain is the leader, but he's also directly of service to the rest of the team. Like if anybody on the team is having an issue, you're the one that helps that person. You're of service to that person. It's not they're of service to you. You're trying to apply whatever you can to help bring up the weakest link and the strongest link. And that's the same for me. It's the original idea of to minister to somebody, or the samurai, which is an example I always use. Like samurai, people think of it as like, oh, a badass warrior, dominant. Well, samurai means to serve. You know, that's like the actual definition of it. And that's what a real leader does, is he leads by example. He serves the collective. He serves his team. And he serves the greater good. And then in doing that, the greater good will serve him. The principles of reciprocity will hold.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's definitely one of the things that I've really, as I've become more and more comfortable with that responsibility, is trying to gain that awareness of the guys around me too. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit it's been a long road. I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of my own, I guess, emotional baggage that I carry around, that in some ways, we were talking the other day about, some things that kind of make me a good player, and how I get a little too intense on the bench or in the locker room. And sometimes if another player would have projected that same intense vocal energy my way, I would have responded to it differently, where maybe some other guys wouldn't respond the same way I would. Whereas like I've really learned to have a better understanding of what makes guys go and what makes them better, and how their personalities are different than mine, and just having that awareness of what's going on and checking in and being a little bit more connected to what's going on in the locker room has gone a long way. I'm not saying that I've figured all that out yet, but it's just knowing those things that make you a better captain or a better leader and stuff like that too. So obviously, yeah, that's what makes it fun, is there's always something new coming your way.
Yeah. All right, so let's say that you could broadcast a message to all the billions of people on Earth, and they would listen and pay attention and understand that, this message will change throughout your life. But right now, with the accumulation of what you know and where you know where people are generally at and starting, like, what message would you broadcast out there to the people of this planet if you could?
I mean, it's funny because I think the reason I've been so drawn to On It and the reason we become good friends in a short span, I talk about it all the time, and you can put in a lot of different words, but I believe that the total human optimization is the beginning. You said it best, when it starts with you. It starts with the individual. I think then I believe it translates into your next motto, for the good of all. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you really start to, I kind of told my story the other day as far as how I really got into nutrition. And I know I probably get a lot of people's nerves on this subject, especially people that are close to me, because it's something I always talk about and I'm very passionate about. When I got into really understanding my body and eating the right foods and all that stuff, you start to learn more about where that food comes from, where it's been produced, like what's going on. And then you realize, like, this is not only agricultural and health and medicine, but it's political. It's stuff that affects how the world works and what's going on. And you start to realize a lot of different things, and you start to pay attention. Again, this is like a kid who's grown up playing hockey and is not worried or focused on anything else his entire life, and he gets to a certain age where the light bulb starts going off. You're like, okay, I see what's going on here. And all these different things start to kind of, you start getting turned on to a lot of different things. So the last thing I think I really come to talk about is the consciousness part of things, and how there's, we can go on and on and on about the issues that are, that we're dealing with, not only, in the United States or in Canada, but around the world, and how the answer, the first step towards solving a lot of these issues is that consciousness problem, that we're not really connected. We're not really truly connecting with ourselves and with the planet and what we're putting into our bodies and the decisions we're making every day. We live in a world it's really, really easy to get distracted and get caught up in this whirlwind, and then we kind of think we're making free choices and our own personal choices every day, but really we're not. We're kind of living in this little box and this little tight way of thinking. And the second you start to talk to people like yourself, a lot of people here at On It that really have a higher understanding of these things, you get into the meditation, you get into the reading the books, you get into talking to people that have these different perspectives on things. I mean, I think one of the crazier experiences I've had, really kind of got me starting to think this way was one night I remember I couldn't sleep, and I was just having these crazy dreams and these visions of being some type of war prisoner, someone who was, I guess, enduring some intense physical pain and torture and suffering. And I remember waking up the next day thinking, why isn't that me? Why am I this person who was born into this body, who has been given this set of opportunities to have a successful, have a comfortable, have a luxurious lifestyle with all these things kind of falling into my lap. And it really made me think, okay, I know I've worked really hard. I know I've put in my time to become successful at what I'm doing now. But how much of that is really me? How much of that was me doing that on my own, independent of like any other force surrounding me in any way? And, I like to think otherwise, but I think the real answer is that not much. I think there's, we all got some inner energy that drives us, but sometimes you need to, again, that intention, that energy, that positive vibe that you give out. I think there's a lot to be said about what you can attract, but sometimes too, some people are dealt some really tough cards, and there's a really tough way to come back from that, depending on where you're born in the world, what type of family, what type of environment you're born into. So I think, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but it was something along the lines of true consciousness is understanding of other people's suffering. And I think that it loops back into what we're saying as far as being a leader in a locker room. Maybe not necessarily talking about suffering, but understanding about what makes someone a good hockey player, and just being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and know, okay, what makes them happy, what makes them successful, what makes them go out there and play their best game, what makes that person go. And really coming to the realization that could be something completely different than what works for me. Yeah. I think for me, I've always maybe been someone who lacks a little empathy and understanding, and that was for me a big step forward in really understanding that there's a lot of people out there, although they maybe seem similar to you, they think very differently and they feel very differently. So I think that's the whole consciousness thing that I think you are talking about, and that I'm really connecting with, and I'm starting to learn about. So it applies to sport, applies to hockey, applies to business, applies to everything that we're doing. So again, it's starting that conversation. And my message, I guess, again, to get back to what I was saying earlier, to not be so preachy and to try and come off as that person who is a little bit self-righteous. I think I got to catch myself there sometimes, and it's just kind of walking the line between being excited about new knowledge that I've been lucky enough to come across, and at the same time being able to share that with others who are maybe seeking out these same opportunities but haven't quite found them yet. And I mean, if you're a Blackhawks player in Chicago, that's a hell of a platform to start on. And to start that conversation, I would imagine a lot of people out there, like we said earlier, maybe there are a lot of guys across the NHL and other sports that are thinking the same way, but there's not necessarily that playing field to really have that conversation yet and to move it forward. But obviously people like yourself, I listen to Joe Rogan. You guys are good friends. The conversations that you guys have and the podcast, I think that's amazing, because that's getting that out to a lot of people and kind of creating that atmosphere to have the conversation, for sure. Sure.
I think you bring up obviously a lot of really important points there, but I think one of them is that you mentioned the differences between people with different opportunities and different platforms, and yes, I think really it doesn't matter what your starting point is. Like I think like people make the mistake of thinking that because you're able to reach more people, somehow you're better, or that's like a more important role that you play. Like we all have our role to play, which will be to reach the highest extent that we're possible. That's what human optimization is. It
Right.
isn't trying to all become Jonathan Toews. It isn't to become all, Joe Rogans. It's to become what your potential is and live that to the fullest. So somebody who has a much more limited opportunity, they're not any less than anyone else who has a lot of notoriety. It's just about, can they optimize the hand that they've been dealt? Can they do that? And that is as good a life well lived as any other life. And if you're dealt a really shitty hand, like there's a story in I believe it's Ryan's Obstacle Is Away Again, about the prisoner of war. I've told this story before. He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and obviously horrible conditions to be in. And very, at that point, you have basically no opportunity to make a positive impact on the world, other than perhaps some of your prisoners that you get the lucky enough chance to encounter. But he made the decision to play a round of golf in his head every day on his favorite golf course back home, to stay sane and to keep his spirits positive, and to help keep the spirits around him positive by his own mental state. And he did that, and for like 7 years he played that round of golf every day in his head. And then finally he gets out of the POW camp, goes and plays that round of golf and hits par. An amazing story. And that's he was dealt one of the worst hands in human existence, being a prisoner of war, and he played it to the fullest. And that's all that any of us can do. And we hear that, and that's as inspiring and as important as anything else in any of these stories. It's just playing the cards that we have to the ultimate level that it can be dealt. And I think that's really the key. And so, you were dealt a damn good hand, and you're playing it the best you can, and you'll continue to play that. And I think that's something that a lot of people in your position don't realize is, they're playing a really winning hand. What are they going to do with that? What impact are they going to make on the world? Are they just going to, in their twilight years, just drink themselves to death and, have adulterous affairs and do the thing and dream about the glory days? Or are they going to take their money, their platform, and are they going to try and apply that to the greater good of all? Are they going to use their inherent influence for something greater than themselves? And that's what will determine ultimately whether they've lived that life well lived, whether they can go into the twilight ether with that attitude of, today is a good day to die. Like, man, I've done what I can do here. And it's not going to be about how many trophies they hoisted. It's going to be about whether they applied themselves for the greater good of humankind. I think that's the standard we will all hold ourselves to.
Yeah. Do you think we're getting to a point where the status quo, the paradigm is starting to change? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you meet with a lot of business leaders, guys that normally most people would assume are very concerned with primarily their bottom line. But as we've seen around here at On It, some sacrifices can be made in some ways to uphold a certain level of principles. I mean, I feel like I hear new stories every day, and the latest one was, for example, CEOs in Silicon Valley in California are microdosing small amounts of LSD to expand their minds the way they think, and to be able to promote that creative thinking. Whereas, like, I feel like a little while ago that would have been completely off the charts, not even a conversation, and that type of thinking is suppressed. Where, you're obviously very open about some of your experiences. I mean, do you see that changing, and is it going to happen through this capitalist kind of business
100%,
avenue?
100%, because there's a couple reasons for it. One, consciousness is just expanding. We're in, a lot of philosophers track 7 pulses of consciousness throughout civilization, periods of enlightenment that have traveled around the world. There's a pulse in India, there's a pulse in Peru, there's a pulse in these different places where consciousness emerged and flourished. And we're in, truly what I believe to be the 8th pulse of consciousness, where the awakening, facilitated partly by the plants, facilitated partly by things like, sensory deprivation and the availability of meditation techniques and yoga and all of these things that are flourishing, taking care of your body, nourishing your health. These amazing books and mystics like Don Miguel Ruiz and Eckhart Tolle who've come out and put these ideas out there that have flourished, and And we're in the midst of that now, and that's happening, and that information is spreading, and that's a deep, deep human yearning. It has the advantage in that it comes with love, and love is our truest state. The rest is just delusion and suffering. And so it's working its way as it should, because it has the least amount of resistance, because it is truly our highest calling and our true nature. So it has that advantage. But also it is now, although society is weird and society is going to lag a little bit, we're also social creatures. And what we're seeing is that those virtues are being respected more and more by society at large. I think one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders was so successful is that people really want to give back. Like the idea of, let's give as much as we can to our fellow brother and sister, that idea is becoming more and more popular. Like it's rather unpopular to just be a tycoon. Like in the 1920s, to be like a railroad tycoon, or some of these Roosevelts or Rockefellers, or that was like the idea. Like, man, if only I could be that guy. And those people were really put on this pedestal of like the epitome of what you could be. Well, now that's not the epitome. The epitome, people still like the fame and fortune, but to really have the respect, it's about how much good you're doing, And so I think there not only is all of that consciousness coming in because it's true and because it feels right, it's also now becoming more respected and more important. So the combination of both of that is a ripe environment for the next wave of entrepreneurs and wealth creation to have a very conscious and socially focused mindset. So I think we're poised for a really interesting time. Now, there's a conflict between the old guard, that old way of thinking, and the new way of thinking. And there's going to be, a little jostling probably. It's going to be a little rough adjustment period as that happens, but it's coming in smoother and smoother. And you're seeing the effects of this. Like, I don't know if it's actually happened, but I heard that the DEA is considering rescheduling marijuana nationally so that it becomes a medicine in all 50 states. And we all know that that's the right decision and the true decision, but it's taken a long time for the government to acknowledge certain inherent truths about these things. And it's finally starting to happen. And so I'm very encouraged by that. And, while I'm not going to be too rose-colored glasses about it, because I know there'll be some conflicts, I'm really encouraged that that's the way it's going to go. And as long as we can survive this transition period without additional resistance and people freaking out who are afraid of the new way, this change startling them and, forcing them into some crazy actions, as long as we can survive the transition period, we're set up for a really exciting time ahead.
Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I feel like that transition is happening the right way this time, where it's kind of a left meets right mentality, where you have to be a little bit of both for some people to be able to see eye to eye with you. Because I think, in my limited knowledge about the 1960s and that the whole, liberal hippie movement, was that it just offset. It was just too much too fast, and it created that fear of whether it was government or authority to try and control these people that were seemingly loose cannons, but we're obviously pretty smart and pretty open-minded and forward-thinking, where I feel like you could obviously elaborate on it quite a bit more, that now if you're seeing a guy who's kicking ass, his business is taking off, he's bringing tons of successful people from all walks of life together, and he has all these different understandings that he's gained from plant medicine and meditation, all these different things that really, at the end of the day, create the strongest individual. I think the person who, that artist within that is truly unafraid of freedom and is able to look at his own fears and his own weaknesses and face that and go forward and right through it, is the opposite of the person who's just basically going to accept, the given rules that society throws at them. I feel like there's more and more people like yourself that are doing that. And then if people over here who originally had that fear of all that stuff, of someone out living in the bush doing their own thing, they might seem like they're a little bit crazy. They might be actually really smart and onto something and really connected to who they are and what's really going on here. but there's no way that they're going to take their word for it. It's got to be someone who's out here playing the game, as you always say, has a stake in the game, and I truly believe that's the way it's going to change.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there was a time, like even when you look at 80s movies, there was always the stereotypes. Like there's caricatures made. There's the hippie. There's the sensitive nerd. There's the dumb jock. There's all of these different things. And we tend to think in these stereotypical things. But that's all evaporating now.
Yeah.
And all of these things are merging, and I think the balanced man, the Renaissance man, the warrior poet, this ideal of someone who's complete in all aspects is becoming the new ideal. And it's something that philosophers and theologians and different things have philosophized coming. But I think that's really what it is. It comes with consciousness, a respect and love for the body and all the things that it can do, and also respect for consciousness and the mind and everything that it can do, and bringing it all together to experience this incredible video game we call life to the absolute fullest, to play all the levels, to feel all the joy, sorrow, sadness, love, everything that we can, and experience it all to the fullest. And I think that's the new ideal. And I think, if you're trying to do anything else, like there's some people who, try to diminish the body, like, oh, don't worry about the body, focus on the mind. Some people are like, I'm just going to get jacked, fuck all this hippie shit. They're just really limiting themselves. And I think that recognition is starting to happen. And you can't create these little stereotypes to put people in boxes. And that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about you. And everybody who meets you says the same thing. It's, what people think of a star athlete. They think massive ego, gonna be a dick, not gonna listen to him, blah, blah, blah. Like all of these things, every single time you shake someone's hand, you shatter that. And then they go back and go, huh. Interesting. And then that allows them.
There's probably some moments out there. Let's just not completely wipe it off the slate, But I guess you're right. I mean, and I think that's natural for anybody too, to meet somebody, whether it's a preconceived kind of perception of what you think that person is. I mean, I do it all the time. It's easy to categorize people and then to just throw them under this, in this box of probably what's going to define the rest of their person. I get it all the time within the locker room. Guys find out I'm growing my vegetables at home with these tower gardens, and I'm into all this different stuff, and then they start calling me the tree hugger and the hippie, and I'm that guy all of a sudden.
And then all of a sudden you see that start to creep into their life too.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to take some of these darts in the skin. That's what being a leader is like, ooh, that little dart might have hurt a little bit, but that's okay. I'll take that because I'll forge out ahead and I'll be at the front of this thing, and I'll take a little bit of that chirping and I'll be okay with it.
Well, and it's again going back to, I don't know, I believe this was in Holliday's book too, where he talked about one of those Stoic guys. I think it might have been Cato or Seneca or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was something I'm like, man, that's what I should do. I mean, within reason, as far as doing things that are going to kind of entice some type of, in hockey we say chirping, but like people that are going to, kind of rag on you or give you shit about something. Because it kind of it builds that thicker skin, and it builds that stronger inner self-esteem, that if you can do something, whether it's reflective of what you believe in or not, whether it's just wearing something that's goofy and you're gonna get hard time from the boys, how guys in a hockey locker room can be, then I think you start to, at least for me, start to get less sensitive towards the things that are detrimental and that negative energy that you're talking about. I think for me, the biggest example, and again, I haven't had any huge issues yet. I've been getting a lot of love so far on social media, but I haven't been on Twitter and Instagram for a long time, but it's something I'm constantly reminding myself of. If I got to put something out there, and on one side of it, maybe be receptive to some of the criticism, because some of that might be true, and I should be somewhat conscious of it and try to understand some of it, but also the other side of it, that I can really just read it and absorb it and let it go. And I'm strong enough to do that, and to constantly remind myself that whatever you do, there's always going to be some positive and negative reception to it, and to be ready for that and not let it dictate where I'm going to go next. I got to stay strong within my core principle of, you know, core beliefs, and move through that no matter what, because I think for the most part, you know, things will be received well if your intention is good. But it's good practice, I think, to look at it that way. And I think you said it really well, as far as, you know, practicing little things that you know you're going to get made fun of for, and it's not the end of the world, you know. I think a lot of people are so worried about that, and eventually, again, it's easier said than done, but when you see young kids nowadays refreshing their social media, looking for the likes, looking for the thumbs up, all that stuff is kind of sad, because that's really how they're forming their inner opinion of themselves in the long run. So it's kind of a tough subject, but for me, it's been good practice, because
no doubt,
you know,
and that's the attitude.
Seek out.
And we got to head to the airport, but it's a great way to end. Like, go towards these things that are your fears. Go towards these things that'll challenge your ego. Go towards these things, and if you can be non-reactive and just sit with them, and Eckhart Tolle describes this really well in A New Earth. Like, take these perceived insults, and if you can become non-responsive, you get so much stronger from it. You know that you've mastered this certain element of yourself. Not mastered it, but you've grown stronger in response to it, just as the body grows stronger in response to a workout. So and that is the best way to improve. You want to get stronger in the gym? Take on resistance and recover. You want to get stronger mentally? Take on mental resistance and recover. You want to work on your ego? Take on slights to the ego and recover. You know, it's the same thing. Move toward resistance. John, it's been great, my brother.
All right. It was too quick.
Yeah, man. It's too quick. It's a good start. We'll carry this on again. I think this will be one of many, my friend.
Thanks a lot.
What's your real Instagram and Twitter stuff? Because you have about 700 different fake accounts out there.
Well, I was hoping that the official one would put the rest away, but it's literally,
you do have
I
a
think
little
it's
check
straight
mark,
up Jonathan Toews. Yeah, they should have the check mark on it. So check it out. Lots of interesting stuff on there.
Don't follow any of those other donkeys. They're not real. So follow the real one. If it doesn't have a blue check mark, go fuck yourself. That's what I have to say.
Thanks,
Much
man.
love, everybody. Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, Aubrey.